I wanted to welcome you to the efficiency via the cloud session. This is the first of the cloud track that we have going on this morning. So it's my pleasure this morning to introduce to you our moderator for today, Mr. Richard Skinner, who is the former Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security, the first Senate-confirmed Inspector General back in 2005, and recently retired in 2011. And we are very privileged and happy to have him here today to kick this off and get started with our panel. So, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. You know, my business generally, one way to clear a room of IT folks is to fight an IT or an IT staff. I don't understand Cindy just went through an IT, and I know it can be pretty rough. We only have 1 hour. We're going to be talking about a subject that we'll probably spend 1 week talking about. It's going to be very brief. We're very fortunate to have a panel here, who's who in the federal IT community. And that's Joe Pickerman. What do you do? Joe's fine. Joe's fine. Joe's the CIO at NOAA. Been there since 2007. He's responsible for the acquisition, management, and use of NOAA's IT resources. He has 25 years of experience in IT. And Cindy Castle from the Department of State is Director of the Systems Integration in the CIO's office. And she is responsible for the department's enterprise IT systems and their data systems throughout the world. And then last but not least is Pete Soronis, who is the Chief Technology Officer at the Department of Energy and is responsible for the energy's strategic direction of its IT programs and resources. Panel, thank you so much for taking out the time. You're very, very busy schedule to come over here and share your knowledge with the group here. What I'd like to do, as far as format is concerned, is that I can just ask each of the panel members to give a little background about what they're doing with regards to their respective goals and transitioning into a cloud environment in their departments. And then generate some conversation and Q's and A's. And we welcome audience participation during this. To address issues primarily dealing with the challenges that we face as we're facing in the federal government as we transition into a cloud environment, as well as the efficiencies that we anticipate that we see that we can gain from using the cloud environment, particularly today's environment with budget constraints that we're all faced with. It's only going to get tighter and tighter as time goes on. So if I can just open it up, Pete, we can start with you, work our way down and give us some background, and then we can start a conversation here and some dialogue with regards to your insights.
Great.
Cloud environment.
Great. Can everyone hear me? Is it back? Good. Okay. So yeah, my name is Pete Soronis. You got my name. Right? It's going to be hard to flip it.
No.
I was all prepared to say Pete. Okay. So yeah, my role, I'm the Chief Technology Officer in Energy, which is a very cool job. I was just sitting with Joe and Roger Baker for about 45 minutes talking about just how does the CTO work with the CIO and what is actually my job, how does the role differ from what Dr. Levin's doing with the VA. It's amazing. It's night and day. But in energy, with a very disparate community, which we have, a varied mission of, as I've talked about with some folks just here today, energy, science, national nuclear security administration. You can't get it, I think, any more different and broad than that. My role is unique. It's an evolving role. It's a role that requires a lot of knocking on doors, a lot of conversations with the national lab community, very much mission focused versus playing in the space of how commodity IT, which right, wrong, or otherwise is generally tied to a CIO shop where a CTO may sit. So I've got a lot of freedom and flexibility, even though I have no staff and no budget, to meet a lot of folks, understand what they're doing, and build sort of a collaborative environment discussion around what's happening in those really innovative and transformational thought leadership positions, which they are. I mean, you can go to our website at energy.gov and just see what the national labs do for a living and recognize that they're like eons ahead of a lot of what Klinger-Cohen world of CIO land is in terms of pushing out cloud and mobility, because they get to operate, in our case, under a government-owned contractor-operated type of scenario. But there's still lessons to be learned. They're doing cloud, they're doing mobility, they're doing big data, they're tackling a lot of these issues. So that's really what my role is to seek those opportunities out, bring them back to the department, and case in point, I do a lot of work with the intergovernmental or interagency within that arena. And I get to dabble in data.gov and in some cloud and mobility, and I bring a lot of these lab opportunities and experiences to the forefront. So whether it's sharing a service or a best practice, there's a brokering role there that's pretty exciting and something that I get to do on a daily basis. So we'll get into some dialogue about examples of, but just to set the context, that's my role as the CTO. I get to look at a few Gartner reports now and again and establish some trends, but what's officially on my plate in relation or in terms of this discussion is I have to come up with a cloud strategy for this fiscal year ends. To do that, I'm looking at it from that national lab, headquarters, program office, power marketing administration. We have a policy group that we've convened in the last 2 weeks across all of those different areas. And we're going to really have some stakeholder engagement, groupthink around how to do cloud at this organization, Department of Energy, that is as broad as it is. So we're pretty excited about that. And, we'll probably have some really good lessons learned in the next 4 months.
Okay. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? No. All of them need to be loud. Okay. Is that a little better? Yes. Okay, at the Department of State, I am the director responsible for systems and integration, and in that role, I have the data centers domestically, and then also we interface with the data centers that we have at each of the embassies and posts around the world. Like my fellow panelists here, I'm trying also to figure out what cloud computing means in the Department of State. Right now, we've implemented infrastructure as a service. We've gone to 2 enterprise Tier 3 data centers in the department, one on the East Coast in a commercially leased facility, and the other one on the West Coast with the Western Power Grid, and a owned and built Department of State data center. So we're looking at how we can do our infrastructure as a service and how we can mature our data centers. We're looking at the NIST standards that says, what dictates a cloud computing environment, and we're trying to figure out how that is going to be implemented in the department. Lots of discussion on private versus public cloud. Right now we're taking a very wait-and-see look at the public cloud arena. We're implementing our private cloud. We have a huge security posture, as you all may know. So we're really trying to mature that. But in the future, we do see the public cloud as a place where industry and government will go, but it will be a little bit down the road before we can do that ourselves. Since 2007, we've gone from being basically a co-location facility provider, and we've just started going into hosting our own, going into a hosted environment. So we offer co-location, co-managed, many different scenarios, but we really did co-location before, so it's brought in a whole new level of complexity now that we've gone into a hosted environment. We've gone, since 2007, we now have over 2,000 hosted platforms, and 50% of them are virtualized. We set a 20% goal for our virtualization, and we've far exceeded our level of service to our customers. Also keeping track of what service level we're providing the customer, whether they're co-lo or they're co-managed or they're hosted, whatever we're doing, we need to keep track of that. And then the last thing that I'll mention here that is becoming an issue for us, when we first started our data center consolidation, we did a business case analysis and said a big savings for us was going to be giving back business space to the business. And that has been a big savings for us. But as we move forward, we've just looked at what are the other efficiencies that we're going to be able to give back to the business. But when we started this journey, we were able to procure central funding from our agency. Because of all the budget issues that are going on right now, we're looking at how we're going to start charging back to the customer. Probably won't be very popular because we did bring them in with centralizing our funding, and now we're going to go back and charge for them. But so we're looking at that chargeback model, and we're looking at the NIST standards, and figuring out how we can ensure our data centers for the future.
Okay. Good morning. Joe Kolovich, NOAA's the Chief Information Officer and Director of High Performance Computing. Let me just say a few words about NOAA. If you're unfamiliar with NOAA, we have a very broad mission. Surface of the sun to the bottom of the oceans. We put out 3 solar forecasts every day, and the public counts on NOAA's information to protect life and property, warnings, ensuring public safety, protecting property and the economic security of the nation. This all entails vast amounts of information. So my role as CEO is really looking at our $1.3 billion annual IT portfolio in terms of looking at how we manage, how we use, and how we acquire both information and information technology. Do that through about 150 different program managers. And we are located in just about every town in America and large presence abroad. So we're in a lot of different places. We cover a lot of geographic territory with a lot of information that we collect and process and disseminate out to other agencies and the public. Information technology, though, is integral to all aspects of NOAA's mission. So that's we're very central to everything that NOAA does, and the confidentiality, integrity, and availability are key aspects and vital to the success of the mission. So those are things that I'm really focusing on. But we also have a lot of other mandates and challenges that we, how do we become more efficient? And one aspect is data center consolidation. Well, data center consolidation has also led to our cloud computing strategy, and that we have many data centers across the country. Most of them are very small, and so one of the things we're doing is systematically going through all those data centers, looking at the applications, the systems, the utilization numbers and everything, and then trying to figure out what we can move to the cloud and what we really need to keep internal. So those two are linked, and I also think that you need to look at those together because you don't want to just consolidate your applications, your systems, when you can be more efficient in moving things to the cloud. In NOAA, we moved a lot of solutions to the cloud, and again, given the fact that we're so spread out, virtually anything in NOAA is a cloud solution. It's either internal or public cloud. Everybody is spread out. So we're looking forward to talking about some of the challenges, because there's certainly a lot of challenges with moving to the cloud, but we've also had a great number of successes, and it does really pay off the benefits. I'll stop there.
All three of you hit on something I thought was very interesting, and when we're talking about challenges, and Lisa alluded to it. I'm what they call an IT immigrant. I was born before 1980, so this is all new to me, and particularly when we start talking about the cloud, because I know that this is new to most program managers and the users of data. And what challenges are you experiencing with regards to getting the program managers on board, having them have an appreciation, understanding the capabilities of the cloud? Because there's an inherent fear that if we go to the cloud, I'm going to lose control. I'm going to, my data is no longer going to be secure. And in the business I was in, it was law enforcement sensitive, and oftentimes very top secret type data as well. What are you doing to address those type of issues and getting program managers to understand the capabilities and efficiencies that the cloud can bring to their programs and to their jobs?
So, I'll jump in. Part of it is that it's just the dialogue. I think as much as we like to think the education of cloud computing is near its end, it's never really near its end. I mean, there's what OMB wants from the standpoint of not so much compliance, but what you're supposed to do. Cloud first, 18 months, get 3 of your services in the cloud. I mean, maybe 18 months ago that sounded like a big deal, but a lot of the agencies knew if I throw a website up and I put it in the cloud, I can declare victory, and that's great. I mean, that's innovative. That's one way of pushing the envelope. But then there's the, this thing about what we're trying to educate our mission on in the department is it's really just a commodity. It's just something that is a new way of doing business. So if we can educate that there's opportunities to be gained from leveraging infrastructure outside of the data center where needed. We're seeing that in the national labs. The national labs are looking at commodity IT, but they're running into, not shouldn't say running into, but we've had some scenarios where it's, well, if I wanted an email in the cloud and I want to pass sensitive but unclassified information, how can I do that if the cloud provider can't guarantee the security of it when it's in motion or at rest or even where it is? So what I think is pretty cool about the whole discussion around cloud is compliance is important, 25-point plan, force agencies to start dipping in the water or dipping in the ocean and doing something. But in our case, the challenges are, okay, the mission now has a unique need, even if it's a national lab, for the sensitive or even classified space. Because a lot of the cloud discussion around town is dealing with unclassified information. But we have to address classified at some point. And that's what we're doing at Energy. So that challenge of commodity IT in a national lab is a lot different than at headquarters when we're looking to, say, we've met the mail, we've done some web services and some storage. The whole acquisition life cycle is something that's becoming a discussion and educating that community. And I don't mean just coming to a meeting. I see Adrian here, myself, Keith Trippy at DHS. There's a cloud brokerage discussion. Shout out to Mark Day. He's getting around this idea of how can we maybe get the government to be a broker of, if that's a solution down the road, so that we're going to one place to acquire a service. So the acquisition of the cloud and that education is significant.
That's a very important point, because I see in so many departments, particularly in DHS and in these departments where your mission is so broad, where everything tends to be stovepiped oftentimes. Not only in government, I mean, but within the departments themselves. To ensure efficiencies, how do you get people across these different mission lines to focus on a particular cloud supplier, or even beyond the department-wide level, the government-wide level? Who's leading that charge?
Well, before I pass on, just to answer that one, I mean, it's a challenge. It's like looking up a policy that you don't even know exists. It's somebody has written, but it's dated 1970 or such, but it's still somehow in effect. It's knowing who's doing what in cloud, seeking it out, bringing those people to the table, and the 25 people we've got now in the last 2 weeks across, again, a multifaceted organization of DOE, we're finding out you're doing cloud. How are you doing it with what? What's the data? How do you write an SOA? How do you acquire it? So somebody in an agency has to take hold of that versus pushing memos out. And I'm not saying it's done this way, but when you're in a very diverse organization like us, that isn't received all that well in certain communities when we're already doing it or have been doing cloud for so many years. Why don't you ask how we're doing it and learn from it? So it's a dialogue in terms of it's not a challenge, but somebody has to spearhead that effort. And I think when you get those people in a room, you can start to kind of distinguish, okay, he's doing or she's doing something. I'd like to leverage that because that's the same thing I'm trying to get accomplished. Well, that sounds all simple. It's not that simple when you're working in agencies like ours that are so varied. So I don't know if that's something you're experiencing.
Well, I would say from the State Department perspective, I mean, first of all, we're trying to meet the mandate to put things in the cloud. But we look at the things that are public-facing, they're not a security issue, and we're willing to put those in the cloud. But on the heels of WikiLeaks, we're still going to meetings and trying to recover and do things for WikiLeaks. We're not going to put anything in the public cloud right now, not even email. So we're focused on our private cloud. And it's hard enough to get our customers within the department who are stovepiped to come into our private cloud. But one of the things that we did do is that when we took on our virtualization technology and all the technologies we have in the data center, we have a very security conscious diplomatic security, Richard, as we talked about earlier, that looks at every single piece of infrastructure we bring in the department. And once we were able to get them to validate our VM, all of our other technologies, then our other stovepipe business partners were willing to come to our data center. We started consolidating our data centers before OMB mandated it, and one of the reasons that we did that was because we were out of power, space, and cooling like so many people. And I think the fact that we've built some really tier 3 robust data centers and given them that great infrastructure, they're willing to come into our private cloud. So that's been very helpful for us. And then the fact that we allow them to bring in their own technology, we do allow them to bring in their own servers if they want to. We do allow them to do their own, be their own provider. Basically, we're just giving them the power, pipe, and ping. That has enabled them to come into our data centers as well because they haven't lost that control. Of course, we would rather them be on our virtual infrastructure. We'd rather do as much as we can for them for efficiency's sake, but we do allow them to do that right now. So maybe in a few years that will change.
Because let me address the original question. I mean, I think there's no question about it. We've had enough examples of cloud computing to show that it has great value. It can ramp up very, very quickly, avoid redundancy, and provision new services and capabilities at sometimes a fraction of the cost if you had to actually buy all the equipment and build it yourself. But nonetheless, there are many challenges. I jotted down some of the key challenges, I think, and I think it's important that you explain these to the program managers and you go through them and say, okay, let's look at how are we going to tackle this, because some of it can be more difficult to deal with depending on the situation. And I'm lucky that all of our information is unclassified, and we're really trying to give most of it away to other agencies or the public. But there are some sensitive pieces of information that you want to protect and need to protect. So I think the first thing, talking with a program manager, is talking about risk and security. Security inevitably is, I can't put anything in the cloud because I can't trust the cloud provider and so on. So protecting sensitive information is something that's a big deal. I would also say restricting the use of the applications or computing. How do you manage that? Restrict use. Somebody can get to this application and use the computer or cloud computing capability in one way, and somebody else can't. A&A, the assessment and authorization requirements, that FISMA requirements. Well, more and more cloud providers are able to speak that language and produce documentation, but that has been historically a difficult set of requirements to overcome. That needs to be a very transparent process. That documentation needs to be available. But again, a lot of companies are unwilling to make that information completely available to everyone. So that's, the authorization is a big deal. Ability to monitor and correlate security events with your existing security operations procedures. So we've got all these requirements for TIC, TICAP, and other continuous monitoring activities. How does all that tie in with cloud solutions? Integrated HSP 12 with cloud solutions, something that's still in its infancy. Defining security boundaries. Where is your data going to reside? Where is the computing going to be located? Who's responsible for guaranteed security? Changes in the cloud architecture. How does that change your security posture? That's just security. I've got many other things we're going through. Contracts. Putting those security requirements into your contracts, into your SLAs. I think one of the things that I've seen and learned is you really need to negotiate a strong terms of service and SLA with teeth before you actually sign the contract. Let's get the hard stuff out of the way before you actually sign the contract. Everybody wants to run immediately to a solution. One of the things we've done with our program managers, and I think it's a great idea, it's a great concept, is piloting everything, piloting prototypes. To some degree, I'm not trying to curtail or limit pilots and prototypes, because it's a great way to foster innovation, and everybody believes they can be part of the solution. But at some point, you need to start reining this in and come up with an enterprise-wide solution. And some of the pilot capabilities are actually broader and don't necessarily match up what you actually contract for. So we've had capabilities where pilots are more robust, contracts are less for a variety of reasons. And so how do you explain to somebody that everything they have in the pilot is not what they're going to get in the actual solution? And so there's things going on. I think another piece is the networking, because everything's in the cloud. You have to put more and more resources onto your network, because that is your lifeline to get any of your services. And you're moving potentially a lot of information across your network. And I think the last big item we talked more about is governance. Who actually gets to make the decision? I think we like the idea that industry and these cloud solutions keeps things current. You know, we always got the latest and greatest, and it's always out there. But what happens if we don't like the next big change? Or if it's a cloud solution offered in a private setting within the government, say, and you don't. How are decisions made about upgrades or moving to the next version of software and so on? Does everybody have equal votes, or does the provider have 51% of the vote? And so I think that these things are all best worked out in advance of actually implementing a cloud solution.
You raise an interesting point, Joe. You have responsibility, but how much authority do you have to implement? And does, in your role, do you have a seat at the table when the budgets are being formulated and the direction you want to go? Because that oftentimes is an obstacle to get the budget folks online, particularly now in this environment where everyone is being, when I say everyone, just about everyone is being cut. And those cuts will continue, I'm sure, for the next few years.
Well, I'm very fortunate. I mean, I've always had a seat at the table with NOAA and certainly in the budget formulations. But I think now I see more and more as you ask, Joe, what should we do in terms of efficiencies in IT? Because IT is one area where I think we can still drive greater efficiencies out of and not actually have a degradation of services. You know, we don't want to cut the mission. We've got a very important mission. We want to continue fully supporting the mission. So I think what I'm seeing is you're sitting at the table now is what can we do to be more efficient? And so I think that to some degree, you know, we don't like robust budgets, but this current budget climate may actually be a good thing in terms of seeing greater efficiencies.
But the efficiencies you're going to experience in the out years, whereas now you're dealing with the current day budget. And there are going to be costs associated with that transition. As you mentioned, it would require additional resources across the network, a different type of resource possibly. How do you get over that obstacle saying, okay, I'm going to spend more this year to save a lot more next year?
Let me just take my philosophy on this. I'm trying to move as much from CapEx to OpEx as possible. I want to reduce IT to a service, like a power bill, a water bill, rent, where it's essentially a flat line. If you have an employee, here's how much their bill is, fee for service. They use this much capacity, and here's what the bill is. So we essentially become brokers of IT services. You come to me, and here's a service I need, the requirements, here's the money, and I make sure that the service is provisioned. You shouldn't really care whether it's provisioned in the cloud or whether I run it or not. And personally, I would like to get out of running it, certainly as a one-off, as much as possible. I think shared services and pushing things to the cloud is certainly the way to go. It's a much more effective way to provision the services. So I think that's it's a different business model, but if we can avoid having the need to make a major investment up front, then we can make the transition, we can make a lot of transitions very smoothly. And we moved, we had 19 different email systems, and then last December we moved everything to Google Cloud. That didn't require upfront investment. I mean, it's basically here's how much it's going to cost per mailbox, and that's how much we pay. And so they took care of the transition. So I like to get that flat line kind of expenditure, and I think that we can certainly work out something like that for other areas. Yeah, I want to be able to buy the service. If anybody tells you they've got to build you a cloud solution, you should think twice about whether there really is a cloud solution. You should play with it, prototype it, pilot it, and it should be a seamless transition.
I would just add that kind of ties back to the program management, the education of, as well as having the voice. One of the things at Energy, again, just what we're doing, is our Chief Information Security Officer, Gil Vega, and I have gotten together. He's got a lot of the money in cybersecurity for obvious reasons. And his understanding, his comprehension of what's significant from a cloud computing perspective outside of compliance is amazing. We just sit down, or we sat down and talked about, what does cloud mean to you? Okay? We're working on cloud first, and I really never really go to Gil for anything with regard to what your input on this. But where I found it to be the topic that's linked us, and I think bringing the CISO, or that computer, that cyber element into this discussion, is with FedRAMP. It's going live here soon, with continuous monitoring in the cloud that we hear coming out of shops and DHS. And then just the compliance aspect itself. And he and I have been having a great discussion on how do you actually do that? Now I know there are agencies out there that are using tools to do continuous monitoring in a scenario where it's a private cloud and it's assets that they can define and tell you where they are, and that's great. But what about if folks from the education standpoint are thinking, well, I'm going to go to the cloud and I'll just have continuous monitoring done there. Well, it's not that simple. And I think that's where this next level of education is. If you can get the dialogue going in your agency, like we're doing at Energy, around continuous monitoring, which is a push. It's one of the, I think it was Howard Schmidt, before he rolled out his 3 tenets, ensuring continuous monitoring can occur in the cloud, strong authentication, and trusted internet connection. That's all infrastructure. That's data, monitoring your data. If every agency is doing that in a private cloud scenario, that's great. We get to what is there an opportunity to do that in an infrastructure as a service engagement? And how do you actually order that? How do you pay for it? These are questions that I don't have answers to, but I'm glad that we're taking it to this next level, much like we're doing with the sensitive but unclassified information. Idaho National Lab doesn't want to necessarily jump to a solution that can only handle email that's not International Traffic Arms Regulation specific. But they would rather have one system that can deal with it, whether it's encrypted at home, and deal with unclassified email. Because building 2 systems is not going to save you money down the road. So I would challenge agencies to say, look, these are the tough questions that have to be asked. Policy is going to be affected as a result, or new policy is going to be augmented. The digital strategy encourages that in the security and privacy section, if you read the document, to look at your existing policies for IT. And augment, enhance where necessary, or write it altogether brand new. That's what we're doing at the department. We have to. I can't sit around the table with a national lab CIO and say, hey, we're dealing with commodity IT, we're going to move to the cloud, are you in? It's more a question of, well, what's your role as the CTO, and what type of data do you deal with in the cloud, and what's the security you need? So we're dealing with this policy framework that's going to, I think, be a game changer in government. Because I think what we're going to do, I know what we're going to do, is at least identify the linkages between not only legislative, regulation, mandates, and connect the dots so that someone who you can imagine kind of like a TurboTax for policy, where you answer a bunch of questions, policy can help be generated, or can be generated based on the role of the user. We call that user segmentation, role-based policy development. It's a big hairball of hard work that's gone into the last 2 months, and how can we make this, with technology evolving the way it is, easier on that user or that agency to develop something that might be unique per role. You can't tell me that the CTO at the National Lab in Livermore does the same job and has access to the same type of information that I do. It might require varying policy. And policy can't be, in terms of challenge, that's to me a critical challenge going forward is if we're moving to the cloud, as we're changing to this new paradigm, we can't forget that things are going to have to be rewritten. The digital strategy calls it out. And if we start looking at some sort of role-based development so that what access and what data I need at the Department of Energy in my job is much different than a personnel management specialist or even a CTO in one of our program offices. So these are the types of things that I think aren't challenges as much as discussion that have to be had. And it's picking your CISO, if it's continuous monitoring specific, it's talking to those missions that deal with classified information, and just getting people in the, hey, we're going to do this holistically. We got to know what we're going to buy, how we're going to acquire it, because God bless GSA, they're trying to come up with those types of vehicles for agencies, or we're going to end up working with the vendors individually in private cloud scenarios, and now we've got massive cloud sprawl across government. So those to me are the challenges that aren't going to be fixed or remedied tomorrow, but clearly through dialogue and the kind of things Joe's leading and using best practices or use cases are significant so that these challenges don't become barriers to entry.
And this can be very risky, and it can become very inefficient if we continue down a path that everyone's doing their own thing without some type of government-wide leadership to ensure that we're not being overly redundant, where NOAA's doing their thing, state's doing their thing, DHS, and all 22 agencies are doing their thing, and energy going out and doing their thing. We can become very inefficient if someone is not providing some type of oversight in some type of direction. And are we having a tendency now in a government or an individual department level of getting ahead of the curve in some places? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think maybe they'll set the precedent and lead the way. I know OMB is trying to take that leadership role and trying to bring the agencies together to go to the cloud, but like we've discussed here, it's just not as mature, and if somebody leads that way and finds the right solution, I think that's a good thing in government.
Do we have an avenue to share that information?
OMB polls, they have their work group that comes together, every month or every so many weeks that they come together and talk about all the things we're trying to do as far as the cloud is concerned.
And I would say we have many work groups. I mean, there's the Cloud First Task, just to name it. I mean, and seriously, this is part of it. There's Cloud First Task Force, there's Cloud Computing Consortium, there's Cloud Brokerage Group, and it's well-intentioned. But I was part of a meeting just a few weeks back at White House Conference Center with GSA, various factions of GSA. I met at OFPP, a couple agencies, talking about how do we all in this, I mean, it was everybody's developing and doing something for the good of the cause, but we are splintering the discussion. And I don't think it's feasible to think you can get one group who can always get together and talk about every platform. So I think from a governance standpoint, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we're going to talk about it next week. Katie Lewin and Scott Brenda and I are going to be talking about it from varying perspective, and I think that's something that if there's some solution out there of how to get the dialogue amongst agencies and groups who are dealing with acquisition issues like they're doing. Matt Goodrich led a great effort. There's a great document on CIO Council's website regarding the acquisition considerations for cloud. Then there's the security roadmap and the NIST cloud computing considerations. Then there's the voice of the agency that's like, I don't even know where to start. So I think that there's something there that, again, has nothing to do with the technology, but it's the messaging and then the direction, and that the right people in the agencies are empowered to make it happen. And it's not always the CIO.
The interesting thing is we met with the Netherlands, the government of the Netherlands, 2 weeks ago, and they're struggling with this exact same issue. But what they have come up with is kind of like FedRAMP, GSA FedRAMP. They are going to create one government cloud where all of their government agencies will host their data, their information, and they think that's the solution, and they're working towards that. But it's interesting that other countries are struggling with this as well, other governments.
If I could add one other thing too, is that I co-chair the Shared Services Subcommittee, and I think you asked where it's all coming together. I think when we put up the Shared Services Catalog, because I look at cloud as kind of the ultimate shared service, and it's ultimate efficiency, but what you're going to see in there are different interagency shared services, and I think initially you're not going to be able to go in there and order all those services, but you'll certainly have visibility into what are people using, what are people making available across departments. Now there's a whole host of other great cloud solutions and other services that are available mostly due to acquisitions inside of the departments. I think one of the things we've got to do is figure out better ways to structure acquisitions to allow the people to take advantage of these solutions. And we've also got to figure out ways to work the budget and transfer money easier. Because if I find something that he's doing over energy or he's doing in the state, and I want to transfer money to them, it can take up to a year. And that's just too long in terms of being able to quickly provision services. Now, if they can flag, here's a cloud solution out there in the private sector, I can structure an acquisition that would go after it, a solution like that, and that would be faster, I think, for the most part. But we've got to figure out ways of taking advantage of capabilities that already exist out there, so we don't have to go and invent our own.
I think FedRAMP is going to help that. I mean, from what it says, and if you think about it from infrastructure, the government uses very similar infrastructure in terms of the plumbing, right? We all do use routers and switches and gateways and the like. And to look at someone's security plan or some infrastructure as a service component, say, that's pretty much like mine. It's that differentiator of, well, I'm going to also do some continuous monitoring on my specific, applications that I have homegrown or built that are unique to my mission, that I can't get that, but I want that other 80%. We hear that 85-15% with regard to FedRAMP, which doesn't fully meet your needs. That's fair, but does that going to cause complexity to where it's, I'm just going to go do it on my own. I'm going to go do it because it's easier to deal with the vendor. And I don't think that's in the spirit of what we want from the vendor. But it's something that, if something isn't, maybe if it's not an apple for an apple, which is unfortunate because infrastructure is generally something that is what we want to say, hey, that security plan that's at moderate or for whatever, that is what I want, but man, I have this outlier kind of application that won't allow me to go to that solution. So you know what? I'm going to have to come up with my own security plan. So that's just something that I think needs to be addressed because I don't think it's a build it and they will come necessarily. I think it's going to have to come out and people are going to have to embrace it, show that it works, and it can't be lengthy if it's taking a year to transfer funding to share a service, because that kills the whole momentum.
I think one of the challenges I didn't spend a lot of time on is the people, the workforce, because I think we're really looking at a different skill set. My own staff, I've got a lot of people who have Microsoft certification, Cisco certification, all these certifications, and they're used to having some IT, some hardware and software that they're responsible for and managing. But I think the future is more of integrating a lot of business skills in there as well. Contracts, program management, negotiating, defining service level agreements, even defining requirements. Because I think if we're going to really take this efficiency to full extent, is that we need to be building services or using services and not building systems. Now that means that if you have a mission unique application, I need a little bit of transport. My network. I need a little bit of storage. I need a little bit of compute. I need some place to store the information. How do you define those up front before you even build your application? How do you reserve those services? How are they provisioned? Where are they provisioned? And talk about risk management. How do you convince the program manager who's responsible for making that work on a given day that the transport's going to be there? So I think we're looking at some very different skill sets coming into the government. And getting away to a large degree from actually hands-on the hardware.
Not only attracting change, we're in an environment now where everything's going, and we're talking about the cloud environment. Everyone's looking at that, learning about it, whether they trust it or not. But also the mobile technology. Are we now able to satisfy employee needs when we say, okay, we're going to go into a cloud environment, and you're still going to have the ability, because that's what the employee wants, is access to data anytime, any place, on any device. And oftentimes we have that now using our own individual servers and our own security systems. Can we do that in a cloud environment?
Well, we can, but we have to look at how we do that. I mean, we're very interested in bring your own device, all sorts of things, and we're looking at how we can do that in the State Department, but still maintaining our security posture. And that's where we're coming up with some difficulties. So I would still say that, you know, there's an evolutionary process that has to happen. But if you go to so many of our vendors, they're already doing that. They're already letting people bring their own device. And that is something that we really, really need to look at very closely in the future. Very closely.
I would say I'm living in, I'd say I'm living in, it's still kind of confusing and complex to get into this. This is my workspace place, and I am that workforce. I don't have an office in Forrestal anymore. I don't spend much of any time in any of our buildings. It's meetings and coffee shops and across from the White House Conference Center, because nobody takes too long to get into OMB. We have a lot of these ad hoc meetings. But you know what? I do have access. I do today. I'm a VDI client type of scenario, or I have access and where my information resides. Whether the question of can we expect it to be, I would hope so. I mean, we have an initiative in the Department of Education, Energy and Education. Well, actually, no, we're the other DOE. But there's a National Training and Education Resource, which is enabling content training material to be built in the cloud by literally just going out and building it in a virtual instance. It's enterlearning.org, making a plug, NTERlearning.org. You can go out and build content on any topic that can be leveraged across the federal government. And that's so cool versus, you know, the option, which is, yeah, you go get a contractor to come in and build that content for you, but to be able to use the cloud for that in a situation that is pretty common across all of the federal sector. The expectation needs to be wherever, whenever. I can do that today from here, sitting on a beach, developing some CTO presentation on such and such in terms of messaging, through things like VDI, through the virtualization, the infrastructure that provides that, whether in a private or public cloud. I think that's our expectation. I mean, nobody might have been into online banking when it first came out for fear of, I don't want to put my information out there, but who couldn't live without it today? Who doesn't pay their bills and love having access to that? I mean, I shouldn't say who doesn't. I like that kind of anywhere, anytime access. Are there too many IDs? Are there things like, ICANN that I'd like to see where I can actually make this more efficient? Absolutely. But to not have to go to an office every day, to have the trust in my leadership, from my leadership, or within our organization to be able to conduct and do my job, I need and expect the cloud service providers, any service provider, to make it so that it's not a scenario where it's too confusing. I mean, telework is a great concept. I'm not the biggest fan of working at home with 3 kids and 1 on the way. Even if it's a secure area in my house, I wish it was a skip, but I'd still probably hear dad. So working from home is, you made a great point. Next generation workspace, place, and force, paperless. Joe and I were talking, we still have some paper there, but I thought we were going to go off the paper today. You know, the space is this, the place is anywhere. We're in Cambridge, right? It's outside. And then the force is, I think, where we have to think about how is this going to change the 40-hour work week? What does that do to human capital in that discussion, that user segmentation, that role base? What is it you do that would require enabling you to be a mobile worker? Things like that, the policies associated with it, you know, the dependence upon the infrastructure being there, that should be the least of our concerns. The networks darn well better be able to support it. Now we're getting into the human aspects of how is government changing because of the cloud. And we're having those discussions with human capital. Again, what's a 40-hour work week? You know, is it showing up? Is it working from home? Who's paying for the internet connection? Who's paying for these devices? BYO policy? What's the real implication there? things need to mature, they will. I just think that's a question to be continued in regard to this mobile aspect.
Very interesting. We only have a few more minutes, and I noticed we haven't had a lot of hands being raised out in the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So just to tag on to that theme on the sort of human part of all of that, you talked a lot about the challenges we have with acquisitions and figuring out SLAs and security and all the rest. But what are the challenges that you're having in each one of your agencies around the human aspect around all of this, whether it's as you go to more commodity, is there the fear of losing jobs or retraining? So if you could talk a little bit about that and how you're maybe overcoming that in your agencies.
Sure.
Yes, I mean, all of the above. We do have employees who are concerned about losing their jobs, especially on the government side. We just had a big contract that is a firm fixed price contract, and so the agency didn't figure out what they were going to do with the government FTE, so we've had that issue around going to more of a commodity firm fixed price, all of IT sort of contract. So that's an issue. We have people who now are looking at how to retrain those people and what skill sets we need to bring them into. We've also looked at, should we divide the work scope so that the firm fixed price, we redefine how that's being done for that contractor, and then we give the government IT folks a different line of work to do in that regard. But it's all causing a lot of discussion on where we go. And then discussion, we've brought a lot of the stuff into our corporate data centers. And so we have other lines of business or bureaus who are asking, they think they're going to lose their jobs. And that's where our co-location sort of model has come in, where we say, come into our data center, you don't lose anything. And then, we evolve as we go from there. But there's a lot of discussion on that. And then, just to piggyback on, finding the right skill sets out on the public side that we need in the data center. It is highly competitive, and we do have trouble keeping the really great skill sets that we need, and the new emerging skill sets. I mean, technology is changing every day. That's a problem for us, number one, but also keeping up with the IT, with the human aspect of that is difficult as well.
I agree with everything you said, certainly within NOAA, but also we've offered a very basic early outs, and we offered one round, and we're probably going to offer another round as well, because you want to provide the training opportunities. Here's an opportunity for you to get retooled, new sets of skills, but some people don't want to go down that path, and so give them another avenue.
I think retention and recruitment are key, and that's where I think it's an opportunity for federal employees, even with contractor support, to own more of the responsibility, whether it's developing content, like I referenced on the training materials, developing policy, or managing SLAs. I mean, somebody's still got to manage an SLA and call when a service provider says, it wasn't our fault. Well, yes, it does, and then you can wade through the contract. Somebody needs to, there's still that aspect of it, I believe. And then there's this topic of, government used to be the coolest place to work with all the cool gadgetry. It's not anymore. I mean, just for me to get this as the CTO and to say, can somebody say it's okay if I had $40 a month to have a beta plan so I can use it and test it out? It was ridiculous. I mean, it took forever and ever, but people are coming in and coming out of college with the expectation that technology has been piloted, it's had a proof of concept developed, and I want to go work there. So that's the recruitment and retention, and if it's folks want to move on and not deal with it, there's ways that can be handled, but we've got to be thinking as a government how to attract people to come to do the job that is still needed, even if it's in a cloud somewhere. There's still a role, I believe, that from the administration standpoint.
That is so true, because we always have a tendency to be chasing the technology as opposed to leading it, particularly with these young people coming out of school today. They walk into an office environment that is not fully equipped, or does not at least have a strategic plan to be fully equipped. You're going to lose them very quickly. We have time for one more question, then we'll break up. Yes, sir, you have your hand.
How close are we to addressing the issue with the FAR so that we'll be able to provide the services that it can buy by the training? Because right now you guys Wouldn't that address some of the issues we're talking about, just the work groups and everybody coalescing with industry and government to solve these problems faster? Just wanted to see what your comment is on that.
I'd say yes. Absolutely. I mean, the pricing model, divide and drink, the as a service, pay your bill, make it operational. I think that's something that's been, to some extent, glossed over. I mean, the promise of cloud around pay for what you use sounds extremely cool and compelling. But that's one of the topics that came up just a few weeks back. Again, when we convened everybody, who's tackling the pricing model and the FAR? And that's what this, when I said at the outset, the acquisition life cycle itself is going to have it's going to be impacted by this. But I do think those are the questions we have to be, and I know there are answers to that. Somebody has figured it out. But that's a great point and a great challenge to it at the moment, because the definition of cloud speaks about that. You know, the 15th iteration of it came out and talked about resource pooling and essentially pay by the drink. I don't think that's been figured out yet. And I think that's something that is going to be awfully attractive from an ROI. You want to be able to say, in 2 years, we will be saving this. You can do that with pooling of cell phones and minutes and so forth and make projections. But this is one that I would hope is going to drive people, or should I say, having a pricing model should be something that's going to drive agencies to say, oh my gosh, I can save money. That way versus the potential of saving.
Well, it also makes customers more responsive to how much they're using. Like right now, we don't have a chargeback model. We're going to a chargeback model, but we've noticed that how much our customers use because it's free and they can use as much as they want. When they have to really be responsible for how much storage they use, how many servers, whether there's an application still running on that server, that sort of thing, I think that will really cause great efficiency in the whole process.
One more question.
All right, I want to thank the panel for their time today, definitely. But one thing I haven't heard is the alignment between the federal bridge and cloud computing, as well as HSP 12. We need to bring those programs together. So as you're meeting, talking about the cloud, those other programs are going to align to ensure that you have the security platforms in place. So I would encourage, as you guys are meeting, those other programs need to know how much you're going to depend on them and push out from cloud initiatives to make those federal bridge and PKI initiatives and identification around HSP 12. That's what it's supposed to deliver. One packet card, one agency. It doesn't work. It's got to be one
I
packet
think
card.
we're all agree, yes.
Well, we're out of time. And panelists Joe, Cindy, Pete,